Chapter 14. Court. After breakfast, they all pulled on their heavy coats and trudged to the same cabin they'd met the judge in the night before. This morning, though, people milled on the lawn, sipping coffee and talking in half-whispers. The courtroom was almost full. A few people quietly jockeyed around so the five of them could sit together. Even though the proceeding hadn't yet started, most of the crowd also spoke in hushed tones. Sky sat and nervously looked around the room. Almost everyone from the mountain was here. Only a few of the watch, who were scheduled this morning, were missing. She greeted the friends who were close enough to hear her and tipped her head to those further away. Behind them, someone opened the front door. There was a little rattle from the panes of glass, and everyone went silent as the defendants were brought in. Tom led the way with Calvin, Pete, and Tony following single file behind him. Aaron brought up the rear, his dark complexion making the bright blue of his police shirt that much more vibrant. His clothing contrasted with the orange jumpsuits the three prisoners wore, lending a false cheerfulness to the somber day. Sky eyed the handcuffs and chains on the prisoners with satisfaction. Tom was taking no chances. Calvin searched the courtroom as he strutted down the aisle, acting just as confident as the first day Sky had seen him. Sky quickly looked away. Her stomach turned at the sight of him. Pete's eyes were glued to the floor. She ran her gaze over his massive figure and shivered. She could still remember the helplessness as he. She couldn't think about that. Not until she had to. Tony locked in on Jesse and stayed trained on the boy as they moved to the front of the room. Anger flared and worry too. Even after almost dying, Tony held on to his vendetta. Sky trembled. She had almost died saving Jesse once, and she would do it again if need be. Dylan's large, steady hand slid into hers, and her warmth changed from anger to love. She wasn't alone. Now she had family to back her up. She gave Dylan a soft smile and glanced around. More than that, a whole roomful of people. She turned to Jesse, who sat ramrod straight, staring back at Tony with wide, but defiant eyes. Sky put an arm around him. "It's okay, Jesse. We're safe here." When Tony swiveled his head to glare at Jesse, Sky switched chairs with the boy. Once he was between Dylan and her, she sat forward and blocked the man's view. Jesse sunk his head into Dylan's chest and quivered. His new father wrapped his arms around him, laying a big hand on the back of his head as he held him close. "I got ya," Dylan said, glancing at Sky. "Both of you." They both nodded. Jesse raised his head, and looking at Dylan said, "You won't let nothing bad happen, right?" "That's right. Me and Wade, we've got it covered," Dylan said as he patted his pocket. Sky gave her boyfriend a sharp look, but maybe she was better off not knowing. Instead, she focused on Jesse. After Wade reached over and thumped him on the back. He seemed well enough to sit back up in his seat. The gavel rapped, and Judge Munson ordered all eyes to the front as he outlined the rules of the day. He would call up each witness and let them tell their story. If the judge felt there needed to be a clarification, he would ask for one. Calvin, who was acting as an attorney, was allowed to ask questions. Witnesses themselves could volunteer anything they felt pertinent to the case. Wade and Dylan testified in the morning. It went smoothly as far as Sky could tell. Calvin tried to claim self-defense in Frankie's murder, but Wade and Dylan didn't offer anything to help his case. Both said their only concern had been the dying Sky and beat-up Jesse. The worst part of it was hearing Calvin's voice drone on and on. It worked its way under her skin no matter how much she tried to ignore it. Sky was sure that is what the evil man intended. As each witness walked back to their seat, the dark pit in her stomach grew bigger. By the time it was her turn, Sky was grasping Dylan's hand so tight she wouldn't have been surprised if it was numb. Judge Munson's deep voice rumbled out, "Sky Jackson." She trembled and started to stand, but her weak legs gave way. Sky shook herself and shoved to her feet. "You're okay, darling," Dylan whispered. Sky nodded, wishing all she needed to do was tell her story. But for those three to get the full punishment, she would have to do far more than that. She needed to trick Calvin into confessing to murder.